I have a question. How many last chances have we handed out this month? It's an interesting collection you're building. You treat their apologies like rare collectibles, framing them and hanging them on the wall, even though the ink is usually dry before they break the promise again. Let me ask you, are you actually waiting for them to change, or are you just waiting for the version of them you invented in your head to finally show up to work? Oh, wait. Is it because they said they're trying? That's a classic. Trying is the participation trophy of adulthood. It's what people say when they want the credit for the finish line without actually running the race. You've turned your hope into a full-time job, and business is booming, but the warehouse is empty. You're trading your time for their intentions, but last time I checked, you can't pay your bills or build a future on someone's good intentions. Stop lying to yourself. You aren't being patient or supportive. You're just refusing to look at the scoreboard because you know your team is down by 50 points and the other side isn't even playing the same game. Look. Let's look at the investment strategy you've been running. You aren't actually interacting with the person standing in front of you, you're interacting with a mental blueprint of who they could be if they just decided to value your time. You're essentially living in a house that hasn't been built yet, wondering why you're getting wet when it rains. Let me ask you, how much of your current energy is based on actual, tangible respect you received this week, and how much of it is just a projection of a change that hasn't arrived in 3 years? Oh, wait. Is it because you see glimmers of who they used to be? That's fascinating. A broken clock is right twice a day, but you wouldn't rely on it to keep your life on track. You're taking a single moment of basic decency and using it to excuse a month of total indifference. You've become a specialized historian, digging through the past to find a reason to tolerate the present, while the situation is actively draining you. You think your ability to see potential is a virtue, but in reality, it's just a way to avoid the weight of seeing the reality of their choices right now. Think about the overhead on this potential. It's exhausting to be the only one holding a vision for 2 people. You're drained because you're doing the emotional heavy lifting for a version of them that doesn't even exist. You've turned yourself into an unpaid consultant for someone who hasn't even asked for your advice. You think your belief in them is what's keeping the peace, but all it's doing is giving them a free pass to never actually step up. Why would they bother to change when you've already decided to accept a placeholder instead of the real thing? But they have a good heart, you say. Right. And you have a finite amount of time. But time is the only thing you can't get a refund on. You're spending your best years waiting for someone to wake up and realize you're worth the basic effort of consistency. You're checking the receipt, and you're realizing that potential is the most expensive thing you've ever bought. You're paying for it with your sleep, your confidence, and your own future. Stop looking at the horizon. Look at the patterns. Because while you're busy hoping for a miracle, they are busy repeating the same day over and over again. Now, let's look at the "I'm sorry" loop. It's a beautiful performance, isn't it? The lowered voice, the direct eye contact, the promise that this time is different. You've heard it so many times you could probably recite the script along with them. It feels good in the moment, it feels like a breakthrough. But a breakthrough without a change in direction is just a well-rehearsed detour. Let me ask you, if you bought a car that broke down every single time you hit the highway, would you keep believing the mechanic who tells you, "It's fixed now," without ever actually replacing the engine? Or would you eventually realize that the words are just noise designed to keep you from walking away? Oh, wait. Is it because they seemed so sincere? That's the trap. Sincerity is easy, consistency is hard. Anyone can feel bad for 10 minutes when they realize they're about to lose your attention. But feeling bad about a mistake is not the same thing as taking the steps to ensure it never happens again. You're mistaking their temporary guilt for a permanent transformation. You think their tears are a sign of growth, but often, they're just a sign that they've realized the consequences are finally knocking on the door. You're accepting an apology as a substitute for an actual adjustment in behavior. Think about what happens after the apology. Does the pattern actually shift, or does it just go underground for a few weeks until you've lowered your guard? You've taught them that all they have to do to reset the clock is say the magic words. You've handed them a get-out-of-jail-free card and you're surprised that they keep using it. You aren't being forgiving. You're just being a safe harbor for their lack of effort. You've made it so easy for them to fail you that they don't even have to try to succeed. But I want to believe the best in people, you say. That's a lovely sentiment, but there's a thin line between optimism and self-sabotage. Believing the best in someone shouldn't require you to ignore the worst of what they actually do. You're ignoring the data points because they don't fit the story you want to be true. You're holding on to the words because the actions are too painful to face. The apology isn't the solution, it's the distraction. It's the smoke screen that keeps you from seeing that the fire is still burning exactly where it was yesterday. You've become an expert at translating their excuses into reasons, but at the end of the day, a reason doesn't change the fact that you're still standing in the middle of a mess you didn't create but are currently maintaining. Stop listening to the soundtrack and start watching the footage. The words are cheap because they don't cost the speaker anything, but believing them is costing you everything. Anyway, let's talk about the good days. Those rare, fleeting moments where everything feels like it's finally clicking. They're attentive, they're present, and for a few hours, you feel like you've finally won. You use these moments like oxygen, breathing them in so deeply that you forget you've spent the last 3 weeks suffocating. Let me ask you, are you actually happy in this dynamic, or are you just relieved that the pressure has temporarily let up? Oh, wait. Is it because, when it's good, it's really good? That's an old trap. You're living for the exception, not the rule. You've turned your life into a waiting room, throwing your time and your sanity onto the table, hoping that today is the day the behavior finally matches the promise. You're addicted to the relief that comes when they finally stop being difficult for 5 minutes. You think those highs are the real version of the situation, and the lows are just an unfortunate glitch. But when the glitch happens every single Tuesday, it's not a glitch, it's the operating system. Think about the toll this roller coaster is taking on your nervous system. You're constantly scanning for the next storm, unable to relax even when things are calm because you know the cycle is already resetting. You've taught yourself to survive on crumbs and call it a feast. You've become so used to the chaos that stability actually feels boring or suspicious to you. You're choosing the intermittent spark over the steady flame because the spark feels more intense. It isn't intensity, it's just the adrenaline of nearly losing everything followed by the temporary comfort of keeping it. But I don't want to give up on them, you say. Right. But have you noticed that while you're refusing to give up on them, you've completely given up on yourself? You've made it your mission to protect their comfort while they haven't spent a single second protecting yours. You're exhausted because you're trying to build a bridge while they're busy dismantling the bricks on the other side. Stop checking for signs of improvement in the middle of a celebration. Look at the average. Look at the baseline. Because if the baseline is disappointment, then those good days aren't a sign of progress, they're just the bait that keeps you on the hook. I mean, let's talk about the deal you've unknowingly signed. Every time they repeat the behavior and you stay silent, or worse, you explain it away for them, you are essentially signaling that their current level of effort is exactly what you're willing to accept. You think you're being understanding, but from their perspective, you're just providing a safety net for their lack of growth. Let me ask you, if there are never any consequences for the repeat performance, why on earth would they ever change the script? Oh, wait. Is it because you've already talked about it 1,000 times? That's the problem. You're using words to fight a battle that is being won by actions. You've become a broken record, and they've learned how to tune out the noise while they continue doing exactly what they've always done. You think your frustration is a boundary, but a boundary without a consequence is just a suggestion. You're essentially giving them a map of your triggers and then acting surprised when they keep walking all over them. You've turned your standards into a negotiation where you're the only one making concessions. Think about the silence that follows the talk. You wait for them to lead, for them to show you that they finally get it. But while you're waiting in the silence, they are settling back into the comfort of knowing that you're still there. You've taught them that your unhappiness is something they can just wait out. You've become predictable in your dissatisfaction. They know that if they can just weather the storm of your talk for 20 minutes, they get to go back to business as usual for another month. You aren't holding them objectively accountable, you're just providing the background music to their stagnation. But I don't want to be the bad guy, you say. Right. So instead, you've chosen to be the person who absorbs all the impact while they remain completely unbothered. You've decided that their comfort is more important than your own peace of mind. You're essentially subsidizing their habits with your own mental health. You think your grace is helping them, but it's actually just preventing them from ever having to face the reality of their own choices. Stop looking for a reason why they haven't changed. The reason is right there, they haven't changed because they haven't had to. Well, we've arrived at the final choice. You can keep holding on to the hope that they will suddenly become the person you need them to be, or you can start responding to the person they have proven themselves to be. One of these paths keeps you in a loop, the other leads to your life. Let me ask you, how much more of your own peace are you willing to sacrifice to keep a cycle alive that doesn't serve you? Oh, wait. You're waiting for the perfect moment to draw the line. There isn't one. There is only the moment you decide that your time is too valuable to spend on a repeat performance. You don't need their permission to stop participating in the dysfunction. The pattern is clear. The data is in. Stop waiting for the change and start being the change. If you decide to.